Rev up your engines. All right, people like big SUVs. Here's a Honda Pilot. It's an '09. I'm going to tell you the absolute truth about them. What goes wrong with them, what's wrong with this one, what doesn't go wrong with them, whether you should buy one or not. Now, these are all put together in the United States. This particular one, he's wondering about the transmission. He's the original owner, getting a little herky-jerky. We're going to road test it with my computer and check it out. But when it comes to buying these things, sad but true for this owner, the one year you don't want to buy is 2009, because that's the one that's notorious for having transmission problems. Now, if you're thinking about buying one today, and it's an older one like this, especially 2009, first take it for a road test before you do anything. Take it on the highway, take it in the city. If it starts lurching at gears, shuddering, bring it back and say, no thanks, I don't want to buy it because it's going to need a transmission. A lot of the other ones have more minor problems that are obvious to see. The later model ones had paint that bubbled up. You can see this paint's still in perfectly good shape and it's black. And if anything's going to fade, it's going to be black paint from the heat of the sun. You can see there's some rust because this is Massachusetts. You can see the bolts are really rusty, but that's not the car's fault. That's just cheap bolts. The vehicle itself, as we go under, it's still really solid. That's not a problem that these have. They're pretty solid build. I mean, look at it. There's a lot of aluminum, which of course, aluminum doesn't rust. You got a steel control arm. Believe me, it's gonna rust. I've even seen Lexus steel control arms rust off. This one's aluminum, better design. Costs more to make, but in the long run, it's a better deal. And some of them, the brakes wear out and the rotors warp, but they don't cost that much money to replace brake pads and rotors. It's not that big of a deal. Now, this one came with leather seats. They're still in decent shape. And being a 2009, it's got a reasonable amount of stuff on it here. It didn't come with a backup camera, or I should say, it doesn't have the normal backup camera that you're going to see in the dash. That came later. It's got one built into the rear view mirror. Now, it's somewhat smaller, you can see. If you get old like me, it's going to be harder to see, but it's still there. It was a pretty luxurious vehicle in its day. It's got the old player here for DVDs for the kids, and being four-wheel drive, using the buttons, setting what you want. One of the big reasons people buy these because they are large SUVs. It's the largest one that Honda makes. There's a lot of space here. Put the seats down, there's even more space. And as we go in the trunk, big gigantic trunk, there's more seats if you want more seats. These things have a lot of room, and the people in the back not only have some space, they got a decent view. It's not like they're inside a cave like some of these are. So we'll go under the hood and see that it has a great engine. It's a Honda V6. It does have rubber timing belts, which he recently had changed. That's one thing you gotta do. It's an interference engine, but it gets around 20 miles a gallon on a highway, and for something this big and this heavy, that's about as good as it's ever going to get if you have a gasoline engine. You'd have to go to a smaller engine and a hybrid setup. If you went to a four-cylinder engine and hybrid, my son's four-cylinder Sienna gets 37 miles a gallon, but it's got a four-cylinder, not a six, and it's also got the hybrid boost. So unless you're getting into high technology, this is about the best you're going to get, especially in this year. It still runs perfectly fine, the engine and everything, but he's worried about the transmission. We're going to take it for a road test in a few minutes to see exactly what's going on there. Now, of course, the transmission's a real big deal, but he still got the original AC compressor. He recently had the alternator changed, and he changed one of the ignition coils. Not that big of a deal for all these years. But realize one thing on this particular Honda. 14 years old, but check it out. It's only got 127,000 miles on it. So in my book, or most people, that's low mileage for all these years. Normally, that's nothing on a Honda, but the problem here is, this is the 1 year that they had problems with the automatic transmissions in these things. I mean, you can get a problem in any particular car, but it was more or less a design flaw of this particular model. So we're plugging the out scan tool on with the engine not running to get the interface set up. While we're waiting, you can see there's all kinds of space. This thing was well designed. Got a big old storage unit here. Even though it's an older car, it's got all kinds of power outlets on it. Realize that the Pilot shares a lot of stuff with the Acura MDX. A lot of stuff's very similar on them, so they're pretty luxurious vehicles. There's nothing slouchy about it. A complex car. We need a complex scanner to really get serious about it. We'll do all systems. You can see we're going through an awful lot of stuff here, which is a big reason. If you're going to buy a used car like this, you want a guy like me to check it out. There's too much things that could possibly go wrong. Going through 47 separate systems here. 7 out of 47, 8 out of 47. Now while we're waiting, realize originally these pilots were made in Canada, but they've been made in Alabama for quite some time. But sadly, in the case of this 2009, it shared a lot of stuff with the Honda Odyssey van. And guess what? Those Honda Odyssey vans of the same year, they had automatic transmission problems. Same engine too, so it's no surprise that both of these in 2009 had automatic transmission problems. And if the owners don't change the oil enough, a lot of these will burn a little bit of oil as they age, especially the ones that have those variable engines that turn off cylinders sometimes, sometimes not. A lot of those are oil burners. If you do have one of those, my advice is to pay a guy like me to turn off the system that shuts the cylinders off every once in a while so that it only runs on 4 instead of 6 to get better gas mileage. That makes them burn oil too. So I wouldn't keep one of those systems active. If you bought one with that system, I would have it disconnected. Now the time's up. We got the codes. There's 4 of them. So let's check them out. We'll look at the BCM, circulation control motor. We really don't care about that. Now the other codes are ABS and tire pressure monitoring system. As with most older cars, the tire pressure monitoring systems aren't going to work anymore. The batteries go dead in the wheels. It costs a fortune to fix. Most people don't care. They'll get a tire pressure gauge. They won't spend a bunch of money fixing that crap. And the ABS, the anti-lock brake system, has one code, which is ECM, PCM, relation failure. The computers aren't talking to each other right. So he's worried about the tranny. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to transmission data. Say any codes. There's no trouble codes. So we're going to look at the live data. And as you can see, we have 62 bits of live data. And we're going to record it and take it on a road test. We go on a road test. Nice big high vehicle. A few creaks here and there. You're going to get that on an older vehicle. Especially one that lives in the rustland of Massachusetts. We'll see how the tranny shifts. I felt a little jiggle there. Let's see how passing gear works. Not bad. See how it shifts here. It's not really too bad so far. I can feel a slight jiggle when it's going down. Nothing outrageous. I'm standing, starting it and see how it feels. Yes, there's a little jiggle there in the first to second and the second to third. Nothing outrageous. Let's go back and analyze the data. So here we go to the data playback and you can watch. There's a lot of frames, 4,143 frames. So I play them and I start analyzing the data. And I can see that first to second and second to third especially, there's a little lag in the command of the shift and the actual shifting of the gear. It's not tripping any code, so it's not bad yet, but it's worn somewhat. So it does have that little shifting jiggle, but a lot of them will do it as they age. Now, this is a notorious problematic transmission, just like the ones they had in the Honda Odyssey, which shares a lot of similar parts, right? But since he's only got 127,000 miles, I predict this thing will still go for quite some time. It'll just have selected little jittery shifting, up shifts or down shifts, because they're somewhere. Now, on the other hand, I would not buy one of these used if it had 200-something thousand miles on it. But since he's the original owner, and it's got that jiggle in it, but it's really not bad, and it hasn't tripped any codes, things aren't as bad as the owner might think. The codes only trip when they get to 20-something% plus or minus. It's nowhere near that. So, if he babies it, it still might go quite some time. The money to replace a transmission on one of these four-wheel drive jobs. In the past, I had customers in Houston get them fixed free when they were still under warranty. And it was a fortune if they had to pay out of their pocket. Some of it was $8,000, $10,000. That was back then, so you know it's going to be even more today. But this one is not bad yet. Now, let's say you were going to buy this vehicle with 127,000 miles on it. I wouldn't pay that much for it just because, you know, eventually the transmission's going to go out. But if you're going to baby it and not drive it that many miles, there's no saying. I mean, it took them 13, 14 years. You put that little bit of mileage on it, it might still last them quite some time. Of course, the good news for other people is if you get a really later model one, they don't particularly have transmission problems with them. They iron the problems out. Now, they're expensive vehicles, there's no doubting that, but they're big, they're Honda, they can last a long time. And the only real negative of all of them are, for some bizarre reason, even the new ones use rubber timing belts. But they're good engines. You just got to make sure you change that belt every 100,000 miles. You don't want to ruin an engine because a stupid little $50 belt decided it was going to snap. That's the only downfall of this particular design. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.